Hi, my name is Kanal, and welcome to the Geeks of the Valley podcast, which connects with some of the brightest minds globally who are leading their respective industries today to discuss the hottest upcoming industry trends and how their work is affecting the global economy. Today, from the DC metro area, we have a very special guest joining us, Akash Raju. Akash, how are you holding up in light of COVID-19?
Hey, Kunal, thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah, COVID-19 is a crazy time. Just a few weeks ago, I was with my co-founders. We were working together every single day, and then we started remote working for the first time. But while I'm at home, actually, back in the DC area, and I'm mainly just practicing social distancing and staying at home and continuing to work on my company. How about you? I hope your family's safe.
Akash, thank you for asking. Everything is well on my end, and I'm happy to hear everything is going well with you. That kind of tears us off into our first question here. Tell us about yourself and how you picked up the entrepreneurial bug.
Yeah, so for me, I went to Purdue University, originally from the DC area where I am right now. And I really caught the entrepreneurial bug, I think, as I was transitioning from high school to college. So in high school, there's a lot of notable alumni, for example, the founder of Robinhood, among other companies, that came from my high school. So I was always aware of entrepreneurship and the startup world. But in high school, I actually studied biology. When I went to undergrad, I wanted to be more involved in the entrepreneurship community just because I was really interested in seeing how people went from an idea to building a functioning product that generated revenue. And after being a community leader at Purdue, I ran some initiatives such as a student run co working space, a co ed entrepreneurship organization, and I worked a lot with the university to build a cohesive entrepreneurship ecosystem. And about a year and a half ago, I started my own company called Dime. We were doing pop up shops around college campuses. And the goal of that company was to really help brands get offline exposure. And come about November, a customer we were actually working with came to us and asked for product placements. And that's how I started Glimpse.
Wow, Akash, you have quite for the young age you are, you have quite an extensive experience in this industry. So you had mentioned that you just started a company about a year and a half ago, if I'm not wrong. What is this company all about? How does it differ from Dime?
Yeah, so the company I started a year and a half ago is actually like not in existence anymore. That company was called Dime. And I would say it's about 6 months now, I started a company called Glimpse, which I'm currently the co-founder and CEO of. And with Glimpse, what we're really enabling is product placements in the real world. So we're purely a software tool, and we work with online brands that sell consumer products, and we place their products in spaces like Airbnbs, hotels, offices, any sort of hospitality space. My old company that I mentioned, Dime, which did pop-up shops, the way that this really differs from that is with Dime, we weren't purely software. We had a whole logistical component of our business, which really brought down our unit economics. So even though we were profitable with Dime, our growth potential wasn't as big to investors because it wasn't purely software, which is something I really thought was interesting as a startup founder. With Glimpse, what's really exciting about Glimpse is that anyone can understand what we're doing. A good example I like to use about Glimpse that really describes what Glimpse does is think about a company that sells mattresses. So we've seen the rise of digitally native mattresses over the last 5 years with companies like Casper. And for them, they have to be able to sell a customer on that mattress purely through online ads and videos and other investments into digital marketing. However, imagine if a mattress like that was placed into an Airbnb and a guest came to that short-term rental property, had a good night's sleep for 3 to 5 days, and then woke up and were like, wow, this is so much better than what I have at home. And right there's a discount code for them to buy that mattress. That that whole experience is what we really want to provide with Glimpse across various product verticals. So to date, in under a month after launching Glimpse, we have 10 paying customers. We're live in over 200 properties. And what we're really learning is that offline interactions with products can lead to a much higher purchase purchase rate, which is very interesting because so many people invest so much in digital ads, and we're really creating a new channel for these brands to increase their exposure and drive sales.
Um, so that's quite an interesting business model you have there, Akash. Uh, in light of kind of what's going on, right? Recently, we've seen a 22% decline uh, in Q1 2020 compared to Q4 2019 for VC funds that are trying to raise funds, right? Um, and moreover, angels and smaller VCs drive a large proportion of activity at the seed stage. And during recessions or crises such as COVID-19, right? Angels and other independent early stage deal makers are even more likely to sit on the sidelines. And recently, with all these big VC funds coming out, such as KPCB, Sequoia, General Catalyst, the Gen Fund, sending letters to their LPs and startup founders on this crisis and how to best overcome it. What are you guys doing as a seed stage startup that is just going on raise right now to work around this crisis? Have you switched the whole business model?
Yeah, so I guess I can answer that question on multiple fronts. So yeah, in terms of the business model, we made a big decision to pivot our business model over the last few weeks to account for the coronavirus. So when we first launched our business, we purely were a marketplace that connected these brands to all of these various hospitality spaces. But what we realized is that spending power is going to go down significantly, especially anyone who's involved with the business that is in the real world, because bookings are gone, people are staying at home, they can't actually go and support the businesses. So a big thing that we did was that we pivoted our business model so a host or any sort of property on our platform can get paid for driving sales for the business. So it's almost like we incorporated an affiliate marketing model to Glimpse. And what's really exciting about this for us is now all the incentives are aligned from both sides of the market. Because for a brand that is on the Glimpse platform, they can still drive their sales, they can still increase their reach, and they have a new channel with Glimpse. On the host side, they can get products that directly complement their properties, but they can also make money by driving sales. And they can use channels such as social media and word of mouth to drive these sales in the short term while they don't have guests. And as soon as guests come back to their properties, they can sell directly to those properties. So all incentives are aligned, and we serve as a way for the host to make consistent revenue during this time. And this pivot in our business model has really helped us hyper focus on growing our bottom line, because now we're, by providing more value to the host and bringing more brands onto our platform, we're actually helping the hosts as opposed to just helping ourselves. So that's something that I didn't even think about when we had first started Glimpse, but now it just seems like such a core fundamental part of our business. On the fundraising side, as an early stage startup, we've definitely seen the direct impacts of sort of just people not giving money anymore, especially with angel investors whose net worths were directly affected by the coronavirus. I think one thing that's really interesting that isn't spoken about as much in the VC landscape is that pre-seed funds and seed funds are still relatively active. So they may not be as active as, so I know VCs that are Series A onwards have completely stopped investing. But in the pre-seed and seed stage, because they make so many bets, the coronavirus is something that made them maybe make less investments or do a lot more diligence. But I've seen lots of lists being shared around. I've been reached out by investors of funds that are still actively looking to make investments. It's just the process and the valuations will be much slower. I think that will probably affect my company, but we're lucky that I had run a company before called Dime, and we were able to generate revenue with Dime. So I've been able to use Dime's revenue as a way to fuel Glimpse to date. And our goal of Glimpse is to be profitable. So what we're doing right now is really focusing on our business model and bottom line so that we can continue to grow profitably so that we're a lot more attractive to the investors that we have meetings with.
Mm-hmm. No, very, very well said, Akash. And I want to touch on one of the points that you had, discussed prior in this regard to, helping these businesses market themselves and get themselves out there by offering your service, right? So it's not solely based on the tech stack and the product or the business, but also this whole idea behind brand marketing and advertising, right? And so how are you helping these businesses advertise their product and service? What platforms are you using? And what advice would you give to people who are, in COVID right now that can't go into the office, that are in businesses that have to, advertise and market for them to advertise and market themselves for them to survive?
Yeah, of course. So I think the big thing is really thinking about what you can do online that directly affects you when you go back offline. So if you think about Glimpse just as a marketplace, right? We essentially have three sides of our market. So we have the brands, we have the hosts or the hospitality spaces, and then we have the guests. So it's essentially a three-sided marketplace, and we're using these hospitality spaces as a channel to reach the guests, which is where that exponential reach really comes in. Because if you think about an Airbnb or an office space or any sort of hospitality space, and think about why that's so useful to a brand, is because if you can sell your product to one person, you indirectly are getting your product exposure in front of 30 people, in front of 50 people, in front of 100 people. During this time when people are like not able to go to these businesses, it doesn't mean that they're forgetting the business or that they're losing the value of the business. It just means they physically can't be there. So one thing we've been telling a lot of the hosts on our platform is to think about their online channel. Like, what can you do online that helps you when coronavirus hopefully goes away? Or even if it doesn't, you have to be able to adapt. So one thing that's really powerful about what we learned in our journey is the power of social media and just sort of word of mouth marketing and stuff like that. So for the brands on our platform, a lot of them have actually seen an increase in their sales during this time because people are at home more. They want to be able to discover new things. So with Glimpse, we're helping these hosts sort of realize that if they have an Instagram for their property, for example, or if they have like a direct booking website outside of like a platform like Airbnb, they can promote products and still make revenue. And I think that that's really interesting because for Glimpse as a business model, if our third side of our market, which is the guests, aren't really there, that means there's a huge latent supply pool, which is these hosts. And then we also have the brands who are still trying to make money. So what we had to learn was if we could do something that helps two sides of the market, not all three sides of the market, and continuously grow and impact the two sides of the market. When the third side is ready to come back, that just will make our business flow completely seamlessly. And I think that this is important for any business that's directly affected by COVID-19 because latent supply pools are being affected. Like for all of these people that have these service jobs or they have jobs that are like restaurants, offices, Airbnbs, or that are being directly affected, they have to think about how to adapt because say the world completely changes forever and with coronavirus, like people have to figure out new ways to make income. The ways that they'll have to make income are going to come from online channels. And if a person cannot adapt, like they will not be able to find a job, which is like a sad reality, but I think that everyone has to be thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about this until we had to pivot Glimpse to be able to accommodate to the times. And I think that moving forward, we're going to see a lot more increase in using virtual channels to be able to drive things like marketing, sales, etc.
Okay. Um, that's very very interesting, Akash. And in regards to diving, more deeply into an entrepreneur and the business in general, right? What are some of the top skills do you feel an entrepreneur needs in order to be successful? in light of COVID-19 and, on a regular day-to-day
Yeah,
market?
I think that this is something that the advice I'm about to give is things I've just really learned from testing ideas and seeing other startups at the same stage as me over the last year and a half. I think the one most biggest thing is don't just build a product. Find a real problem and users and try to test it as quickly as possible. So one thing that I like to do is whenever I have an idea, even if I haven't done a ton of research on it, I just build a landing page for that website very quickly. I'm technical, so I'm able to build a landing page. You add sort of some sort of wait list or a subscriber list or something to gauge demand, and then I just promote it in various forums. So I use things like Reddit and Facebook, and I just post this landing page. And if it gets signups, and if I can start a discussion about the idea, I know that something is there. I think that people don't think about this very much because when they think of an idea, they think about the long term vision and sort of just like, I have to build a product. It has to be the perfect product, and then I'll take it to market. And then by the time they get to the market, either the product timing has passed, there's not actually real demand for the product, the user experience doesn't actually match what the person expected when they built the roadmap for the business, etc. I really think that as a founder, this is preached a lot, but it's not actually done. You have to be able to go and really identify your user persona. And at Purdue, I ran a startup accelerator where we had a lot of early stage teams. And one of the first things I had all these teams do was just build a landing page. If you can put the right keywords and just get organic traction to your website, you know that you have something big. For Glimpse, what the reality really was here was for the brands that we were speaking with that we thought would be a good fit for Glimpse, they had already tried to do something like this themselves. So there's a brand, for example, called Attitude that we're in the process of onboarding. They sell sheets, bed sheets, and when they first were trying to think of their new marketing channels, they tried to work with Airbnbs, but they weren't able to work with more than like 2 or 3 Airbnbs because it was too hard to track where all of their unique visits were coming from. With Glimpse, we're essentially giving them the channel to reach hundreds of Airbnb hosts and track everything. That's how we knew that we had something that the market wanted. I think the next big thing is also thinking about the vision and being willing to adapt to change. I think a lot of the businesses that were affected by coronavirus, us included, like the first thing, especially when you're early, you really think about like how to adapt your business to the times as opposed to how to sorry, let me flip that. When you think about coronavirus, like when we first realized that coronavirus would directly affect our business, I try to think about how to make our existing business just work in Corona time. Like, oh, let's hold off like 3 to 6 months, like figure out what we can do. But I think the other thing is figuring out how to adapt to the change. Like asking questions like, is there anything in our business model that could work in Corona time? And that's when I identified the opportunity of using hosts as these affiliates to be able to drive sales. And then customer discovery, just talking to users, having a good relationship with those users, I think is super critical. So I think those are the two things I think are like the most powerful. I think number one is something I'm probably going to preach for the rest of my life because it's directly impacted the way I start businesses. I think one really good way to see this actually in the market is with startup studios. So the concept of a startup studio is to come up with hundreds of ideas and kill them if the market doesn't react to them. And I've talked to a few managing directors of these startup studios, for example, Pioneer Square Labs or High Alpha, and they have an official process of how they test ideas. And that includes things like building this landing page, tracking retention rate to the site, organic visits, etc., and then deciding it's something that's worth building. And I think obviously that's more of like a official process, but for founders, they should be always thinking about how to actually test if the demand is there. Because I've seen just way too many times in my experience, just being in the startup world, of people not being able to find product market fit because there wasn't actually product market fit in the beginning and they were just fueling money into ads. Yeah. Did that answer your question or did I kind of go off there?
That No, Akash, no, that was perfect, and thank you for that detail. I think it's important for our listeners out there to really hear kind of what strategies you put forward. out there, as well as hear your own personal thoughts, right? It's very important to see kind of what an entrepreneur goes through. I think one of the aspects I really liked that you just recently discussed was this aspect and how you kind of went out on a limb, right? Posting your product into different, onto different social media platforms, right? And taking the leap of faith, right? And the great thing is you were able to get this data and then form your key partnerships that way, right? And I think this kind of goes into, there's a lot of hustling when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you're balancing a lot of things, right? Not just your own mentality, your investors, your employees, right? And your clients. So what keeps you going when the going gets really tough as an entrepreneur, right? Not everyone is an entrepreneur out there. What drives you every day? What gets you up in the morning out of bed
Yeah,
every
I
morning?
mean, I think this question could have a lot of answers, and sometimes I really don't even know myself. I feel like I overwork myself so much sometimes, and really questioning why I'm not just taking the easy path. Like for me, at Purdue, I had a few opportunities to work at big companies, and I had a great experience. When I was getting into my senior year, I had a full-time job offer from the company I interned with, and I could have happily accepted that, but there was just something about that entrepreneurial bug that keeps driving me. And I've thought about this a lot, and I think the thing that keeps me going is really just being able to see something that you bring into the world, like really making an impact. I'm not necessarily saying like changing lives, for example, but making an impact. Like I want to be able to create something with no restrictions. It's all my creativity and my team's creativity, and I can go on a social media platform and see someone organically talking about Glimpse. For example, these Facebook forums of thousands of Airbnb hosts, I want to see Glimpse being mentioned by a host that I don't even know. That's just like, yeah, Glimpse like really helped me make $500 more when I really needed it, and has boosted the experience of my property so much. And I think a good way to keep that motivation is to really celebrate the small wins. I actually didn't listen to this own advice until like very recently, because I used to always think about the big goals. I wanted some external validation to keep on driving me. But I think a really big thing, and the thing that keeps me going, is just celebrating the small wins. After a day's work, talking to my team, and just being like, wow, like this one software component worked, or wow, we converted one really important customer today, or just like, wow, we saw 1% more traffic on our website than yesterday. Those small wins really show that you're getting a step closer to your ultimate goal. And for me, that's what really drives me. I think the big thing about like working at a company and being an employee to someone else that I didn't really love was just, even if I have this creative, amazing idea and want to implement on it, like there's going to be someone else who may not have the same opinion as me that has to sign off on my decision. And I think that's just really tough to grasp, just because the common just saying in the world is that you need to have like experience to be able to like even be an entrepreneur, which doesn't make sense to me. But like you just need to keep developing experience, you need to keep on learning through like established structures. And for me, I just feel like I have unique insights at the age, at sort of just like what I've learned. And even if I'm not like an expert in something, I have the passion to use my experiences to drive change in the world. And I think that as long as I keep thinking that I will keep wanting to be an entrepreneur and building a company. I think for everyone, they may not agree with me because they either have like a different mindset, they're not meant to be an entrepreneur, etc. But I think if you're truly an entrepreneur, the thing that will always drive you is just that desire to like create something that other people are using.
Wow. No, that's interesting. I would love to meet that guy who gave you that advice on the small wins. um, the one last question I had to wrap up this call is what one true piece of advice, looking back at life, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a student, would you give someone who's trying to jump into this industry out there?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have one thing, but I think a key thing that has probably led to mistakes
Hmm.
that I've made is not having a work-life balance. I think that for anyone who wants to sort of jump into the entrepreneurial world, or I guess, let's see, that's actually like that's more if you're already an entrepreneur. I guess one piece of advice I'd give to someone who wants to be an entrepreneur is to not listen to the status quo. So when you're in college, especially, you're going to see everybody around you getting like internships, getting club positions, jobs, amazing grades. Like any factor that sort of applies to your life, but isn't like your driving factor. Like for me, I've always just grown up around people who like really prioritize grades, really prioritize like jobs, internships. I used to be one of those people, probably myself. But once you can stop listening to the stuff, and then once you get out into the real world, you're going to be around people who are working hard to get a promotion in their company. They're working hard to do blah, blah, blah. There's all these goals that people have that are like tied to them. And as long as you follow the status quo, those goals will apply to you as well. And I think the big thing about entrepreneurship and startups is that it's different. Like there's no right amount of experiences or right amount of like anything that you can really have to be a good entrepreneur, because like ultimately it'll come down to like timing of the market, your ability to work hard, the right team, like all these factors that aren't in your control, even if someone tries to say that there's like this one recipe for success. So I think as long as you can stop believing in the status quo, which is a lot harder than it like sounds, then you can be a good entrepreneur even if you don't have like the skills that you think you need to be an entrepreneur. Like you still can, because there aren't actually any like perfect skills. There's probably some things that are important for starting a company specific in a specific industry. Like for example, if you want to build a software as a service, you should probably know how to code. But if you just want to start a company, you've like talked to users, you understand the market, you have passion, and you're willing to stick at it, then like you can take the risk and just go. Like I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice, just because like people, like even if they want to start a company, they're still tied to the status quo, and that usually means if something doesn't go right, like you'll just give up and just go back to your safe like safe alternative. And I feel like I've struggled with that a lot. Because for me, like just being like someone who has like a technology background, like I could probably find a job, and like I'm lucky that I have like a family that like also is interested in entrepreneurship and is like willing to support me and stuff like that. So I have a lot of safe alternatives, and for me, like with the Glimpse, the biggest leap of faith that I took that got me to where I am today, just in terms of my mindset, was like being willing to cut off all my safe alternatives. Once I was able to cut off all the safe alternatives, not follow the status quo, not really care about what other people are doing, that's when I was really able to like put myself into like the entrepreneur hat and wear that hat and know that like I can actually do this.
Wow, Akash, truly, truly well said. The key takeaways here, guys, for the listeners out there, uh, don't follow the status quo. Take a leap of faith. Um, and the way to not follow the status quo is to truly find and work and be able to search for your passion by trying new things, just like Akash has done. Truly wonderful story, Akash. Please reach out to Akash at tryglimpse.com. That is AKASH at TRYGLIMPSE.com. You can also reach out to him via LinkedIn, which is in his bio, and his Twitter handle is Akash Raju 4. Thank you for your time, Akash, and for joining us on Geeks of the Valley. It was an honor to have you today.
Thank you, Kanal. I really appreciated the questions. I had a great conversation, and honestly, it's a great way to pass some time during the quarantining. Thanks again.